We've already talked about this once, that the Earthlings, in addition to the Hubble Space Telescope, still want to send another one into the sky, which would be much larger. Can you explain something more about this? Quetzal says always provided that the relevant earthly technology becomes further developed within the given framework and that the still forthcoming plans actually become realized, then approximately in the year 2025, an enormous and multipart laser space telescope will be brought into a stationary orbit around the Earth, which should mainly serve for the discovery of planets in foreign solar systems, which is why it will then also be named Planet Seeker. This will be so, in addition to other projects of a similar nature, but ones that should already find their fulfillment earlier. Billy says aha, so then, it will still take a while. Then something else we already talked about, the fact that the so-called books of the New Testament, which actually only represent articles or the like, were not written in a single instance by all those to whom they are attributed. Among all the disciples, only Judas Ischarioth was knowledgeable of reading and writing in addition to Jmmanuel himself, who wasn't a disciple but was, rather, the teacher. All the letters, etc. of the disciples were, in fact, written by women and men, and indeed, on behalf of the disciples, for at that time, it wasn't the case that many were experts of writing and reading. There were only the scribes and a few others who learned to write and read because there were no special schools, as these are now available everywhere all over the world and children are obligated to attend them in most countries. But while the Bible and the attached New Testament give the impression that a large part of the people in Jmmanuel's time would have been able to read and write, this actually doesn't correspond to the truth, however, because the vast majority of the people at that time, including the disciples, with the exception of Judas Ischarioth and Jmmanuel, was ignorant of reading and writing. Only special prophets, rulers, and their subordinates in special offices were able to read and write. Thus, it was very rare that ordinary citizens could learn to read and write. And while we're at it, the Bible is an invented Jewish chronicle, which very well holds certain truths in itself but, on the whole, is fictitious and was written together by 12 of the book knowledgeable men who called themselves prophets and who, in 40 days, wrote 240 books or stories that were based on ancient oral acceptances, assertions, and traditions and deliberate distortions, from which arose, then, the second holy book, the number 2, that is the 5 books of Moses or Pentateuch of Judaism. The first Torah had been destroyed in a devastating fire, after which then, more than 400 years later, the second Torah was written by the 12 alleged prophets, as said. Thus, the Bible has nothing to do with true history books or with true textbooks and is in no way connected with the Testament. In truth, it mostly concerns fantasized together fables without any value, which were then stolen in their entirety by Christianity in the last consequence and reshaped for itself. Thus, Christianity itself has also created an alleged chronicle of the past, which are actually designed solely for Judaism and have nothing at all to do with Christianity. Jmmanuel also wanted nothing to do with this chronicle, for he didn't teach their nonsense but rather the teaching of the Spirit as he had received it from the line of Enoch. And what is still to be said, it really was so, that in Jmmanuel's time, as I said, out of all the disciples, only Judas Ischarioth was knowledgeable of reading and writing, while the others were illiterates. This also applies to the 7 disciples who belonged to the group but of whom no records exist from Judas Ischarioth, as well as not of the various other women and men who were on the move with Jmmanuel during the time of his spreading of the teaching. At the same time, I also wonder whether it will one day become known that Jmmanuel's disciples only went with him occasionally because they repeatedly had to perform their work and business, etc. at home, about which Judas Ischarioth also wrote nothing, and thus the impression is given that the disciples had always been with and around Jmmanuel. Furthermore, everything written by Judas is only a brief outline of the entire life, teaching, and work of Jmmanuel, for in fact, this one wasn't just on the move and spreading the teaching for only 3 years or so, as is maintained by Christianity. Rather, he was already active in this form starting from his 6th year of age, and thus, for a total of almost 29 years when he was beaten to the cross at the age of a little more than 34 years. Now the short question of the long speech: will everything that I have now disclosed one day be found out and made known? Quetzal says gradually it will be so, yes. The time will become very long, however, because the Christian religion's powerful figures will try to suppress the truth by all means. In addition, believers of all kinds cannot be taught so easily, and indeed, this is true of all religions and sects that exist on earth. Just as all religious delusions of every kind, no matter what form, were built up over very long periods and were received for thousands of years or centuries or even just decades and will continue to be maintained, so it will also take its time, decades, centuries, and millennia, and to be sure, depending on how long the individual religions and sects have already existed and in what way they are constituted, in reference to the production of fundamentalism, fanaticism, conservatism, and faith. And through the ever more pervasive mixing of the earth people, that is the mixing of peoples, confirmed believers switch their religion or sect because they are of the mistaken view, and this will be greatly increased that another religion or sect is truer in its erroneous teachings, and they are not aware that every religion and sect indulges in erroneous teachings. But still, in the coming time, it will be the case that many people increasingly search for the actual truth and fall away from their religions and sects, but unfortunately, this won't lead to the fact that they find the actual truth. Consequently, they will continue to stumble around in darkness and won't find their way out of this. Thus, it will continue to be so, that only a few people find you and your group, and this will continue to grow only very slowly in the core. In the external area, many will, in a loose way, follow more of your traditional teaching of the Spirit and, with it, the truth, while the ones who turn to the core of the group are only those who truly recognize the truth of the Spirit and the creation in their reason, and also know in their hearts that, without a doubt, you bring the teaching of the truth. But unfortunately, doubters and false players will also appear, who join the core. But this is unavoidable because by you and also by the firm group members, these are given the chance and possibility of learning and recognizing, and each person must be treated equally and everyone must be accorded the same rights. Billy says, not exactly encouraging, what you say there. Can you tell me, then, what all to expect in relation to this and when the group of 49 will be full? Quetzal says, I may not deal with and mention these concerns openly because you will, indeed, still write down our discussions. It is, however, quite possible that I can explain everything to you outside of a publication. Billy says that you can, for I will be silent and will only let everything be my knowledge. Quetzal says, but in addition, these will be very unpleasant as well as sad and very painful things that I will have to mention, also with respect to your family as well as members of the core of the group. Billy says, so speak already. I surely have a lot to digest, but I've already had to do this my whole life. Quetzal says that is correct and, in fact, not known to me. Then listen, those are the facts that I have to mention. Billy says that. Quetzal says, you are concerned, my friend. It really hits you very deeply. It probably would have been better if I had been silent. Billy says, no, it already goes, son. Really, make yourself no worries. Quetzal says, nevertheless, I make myself those. Billy says, it's all right, I'll really manage it, even if it takes some time. Quetzal says, then now, I should probably go. Billy says, no need, my friend. It already goes again. Quetzal says, then we should, however, now speak of other things. Billy says, yes, that will probably be good. Then I would like to ask the following. Semyaza once said that there are sometimes very powerful convulsions in the universe that are released by black holes. What explanation lies behind this? Quetzal says it concerns space-time convulsions, which we also call space-time quakes. These occur when two black holes collide and merge with one another.